As you are no doubt aware, we've had some issues with seismic activity, and we've asked Brandon Agamelian from Focused Advocacy, who has been working for us in Austin on this issue, to come up and talk about what's been going on. And at the appropriate time, I will hand out copies of the bill. So.
How do I control here? Is that me? Am I doing this right? How about that? Mayor, members of council, I'm Brandon Agamelian with Focused Advocacy. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. Wanted to give you a quick update on legislative action regarding earthquakes. There's sort of two parts to this discussion. The first is the appropriations piece. And the appropriations bill is traditionally referred to as HB 1. So when I talk about HB 1 or I talk about the budget or the appropriations bill, it's all the same thing. It's the state's biennial budget, which, as y'all all know, is a 2-year budget cycle. They appropriate 2016 and 2017 monies in the same bill. In that bill, traditionally, the state has appropriated money for a institution called the Bureau of Economic Geology, the BEG, which is found at the university and housed at the University of Texas in Austin. I want to tell you a little bit about the BEG in case you don't know much about it. It's a fairly sizable department over there, about 250 employees. It is led by a gentleman named Dr. Scott Tinker. He is obviously UT personnel as the director of that department. He has been there for 16 years. But in that function, and this is very important, he is also, in that department, the BEG, is also the state's official geologic survey, and they have been for just the last 106 years. So he has a very official state function, if you will. They are a research entity, even in their geologic survey function. They are a research entity. They are not a regulatory body, and they are not policy-oriented. They are, as they described it to me, sort of the science-only piece of the state's geologic survey, meaning they are an objective body. They have operations and facilities and equipment, obviously in Austin, but also in Houston and in Midland. Informally, what I would describe them as is a group of people that are good at running big things, big projects, and housing equipment. They specialize that, and they love to look at rocks and underneath rocks. These are smart people and take their job seriously, and they have very high level of credibility and standing in the legislature. And I personally think very highly of Dr. Tinker. They have an advisory board that includes the Railroad Commission, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the Water Development Board, the General Land Office, and the Comptroller of Public Accounts. So there is a very direct state leadership tie-in to what is going on at the BEG. Let's talk about House Bill 1. House Bill 1, as filed and as adopted by the House about 2 weeks ago, contained what we call an exceptional item for the BEG. It's found in Article 3 of the bill, specifically Rider 13, and a $2.4 million special item, exceptional item, for what is referred to as the TexNet Seismic Monitoring Program. The state has never funded that program before. That is a very important first step, if you will. And that money and that language that we're about to look at together in Rider 13 is there because of Representative Myra Crownover, a Republican from Denton. She has in the past been a member of the Appropriations Committee. This time, Representative Crownover was named chairman of the Public Health Committee, and as such, she can't serve on appropriations anymore. But she has been a very key appropriator and a leadership in appropriations for a while. And so she was able to get that into the base bill as filed and as I mentioned, And as it says at the top there, that is what was adopted by the House. Let's look at that language, the actual language from the text of the bill, the Rider 13 text. Out of the funds appropriated above the University of Texas at the BEG, $2.4 million in GR, and I want to emphasize that this is straight general revenue cash appropriation in fiscal year 16, will be used very specifically for the purchase of seismic equipment and the deployment and the maintenance of a seismic network and the personnel costs associated with the TexNet seismic monitoring program. If you parse that, and we will here in a little bit, that is really an equipment and deployment only appropriation. There is, just to give you sort of an update on the bill, now that we've looked at the actual contents of it, there is no similar provision in in the Senate version of HB 1, which is technically referred to as SB 2. The Senate, in other words, did not adopt any language regarding seismic monitoring or activity. Both bills, HB 1 in the House and SB 2 in the Senate, have been approved by committee and have now been approved by both the full body, House and Senate respectively. And so we now go to what is referred to as the conference committee, where they will appoint 5 people from the House and 5 people from the Senate to bring this multi-bazillion-dollar bill together. We anticipate the naming of those members, the conference committee members to be named as early as tomorrow, possibly by the end of the week, and at the very latest next week. And then once those are named, then we have a lot of indication of who those 5 will be. But there always can be a surprise or two. Once they're named, they'll get to work, and this whole issue will be decided in conference committee amongst those 10 people in late May. Let's dig a couple of inches deeper, if you will, into the funding. I want to emphasize, as the BEG has emphasized to us, this is one-time funding. It is specifically for the purchase of the machines, and the details on that would include 58 machines, 22 of those permanent, and 36 of them portable. The 36 portable machines would sort of be grouped into or lumped into groups of 12, so they'd have 3 dozen series, if you will, that could be deployed as necessary, and then the 22 permanent. Those permanent machines will be designed to complement the 16 permanent machines that exist right now across the state of Texas. I will note for you that 16 seismic permanent machines in the state of Texas does not enable anybody in the state to collect very accurate data about earthquake activity, or to really pinpoint earthquake activity and collect the information necessary. So this 22 permanent machines would really better develop the rather inadequate network that the state has today. I'll also note for you that those 16 permanent machines are not the property of the state of Texas. They're the property of the federal government. They were purchased by the federal government and belong to, I assume, the USGS, is my understanding. So this would be the state's first foray into owning earthquake and equipment, if you will. As I've emphasized, this is equipment and installation only money, nothing else. And the nothing else is sort of a segue into the study. What is not in that money, included in that money or in that language that we looked at together, is any instruction or verbiage about actually studying earthquake activity, anything related to findings or making recommendations. It is, as I've emphasized several times, equipment and installation only. So to that end, Representative Raphael Anchia, who of course represents a portion of Irving and is a very senior member of the House, has proposed and filed a bill in the form of House Bill 2932, and I think John is going to distribute copies for you, and it's a rather straightforward bill relating to and calling for a study and a report to be performed by the BEG on earthquake activity. We're going to go over the quick details of that bill, and I will, at the high level, characterize this as a study bill. It's how it's viewed in Austin. We have lots of study bills. There are literally dozens of bills that call for the study of something or other and that instruct a state agency to conduct some kind of study. So this is a commonplace bill in that regard at the high level, although this is certainly a first for legislation to call specifically for the studying of earthquake. I'll start by emphasizing that currently no one in state government is statutorily charged with monitoring or studying or making recommendations regarding earthquake activity. And probably no city knows that better than this city. No agency in the state of Texas is charged with making any formal findings or recommendations, and nor is any agency charged with making any kind of hazards assessment with regards to earthquake activity. All this, of course, despite the fact that we've had significant and somewhat unprecedented earthquake activity here in the North Texas region. So, the bill before you that you now have a copy of, Raphael and Chia's 2932, calls for three things: identifying earthquake activity in a formal report, assessing public safety issues related to earthquake activity, and assessing what kind of equipment and money would be necessary for the state of Texas to continue to operate an adequate seismic network. Very specifically in the bill, as the language reads, the BEG, if this bill were to pass, in coordination with the USGS and other qualified academic partners, meaning that could be other universities, public or private. The BEG would be required to identify and report on earthquake activity in Texas of a certain magnitude. I think that number that we're going to see in the final bill is 2.0 on the Richter scale, to identify and report on all 2.0 earthquakes. And then some technical language about approximating their focal depths and epicenters, identifying fault lines, and very importantly, identifying any causal factors that may have led to the earthquake activity. Requires additionally a hazards assessment to be done in coordination with the Division of Emergency Management, which is a part of the DPS. And lastly, the bill requires a formal report to the legislature about the necessary equipment and cost. The BEG estimates that this would cost about this study and this effort would cost about $1.5 million per year, meaning $3 million over the biennium. That would be to hire a team of about 6 or 7 geologists, hydrologists, seismologists, and engineers, for professionals that all sound a lot smarter than me, plus some software and machine maintenance cost. The BEG has emphatically asserted that they would like to raise some of that money privately, and that the state, they would prefer to fund about 2/3 of that, so $2 million. Otherwise, it is important to note that this bill that we've passed out would be, in effect, an unfunded mandate. If it were just to pass and then there was no money appropriated for the study, the BEG would say, we don't have the funds from the state to do this, so you've sort of stranded us with this. Quick update on this bill. It has been referred to the House Committee on Energy Resources. I'll note for you that's the same committee where House Bill 40 was referred and heard, so that's the Drew Darby Committee. Representative Anchia, our author, is a sitting member of that committee, and has been. We expect a public hearing on this as early as next week or the following week. Mayor, I believe we're trying to get you down there to testify on this bill. And then last but not least, as I wrap up, I want to emphasize to you that this bill, 2932, does not have to pass as a standalone bill. Language like this can be inserted in HB 1 in the budget as an additional rider. And of course, HB 1 is where the money would have to be appropriated for this study. So I just wanted you to understand that and not be too wrapped around the axle about House Bill 2932 in and of itself, because in the process in Austin, there are a lot of ways to get something fully enacted and into law, and 2932 is not our only avenue. With that, I hope I haven't gone on too long, Mayor. I certainly talked about earthquakes like I know a whole lot more about them than I really do, and I'm happy.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer any questions.
John?
Could you clarify, how does an anthropogenic cause differ from a man-made cause?
He's testing you now.
I wouldn't. I don't know.
So you think it's just one and the same kind of concept here? I'm wondering why they use that word.
I'll have to find out.
Okay, thanks.
Chris?
Just as I think a good emphasis, one of the the goals that became readily apparent is the city of Irving was and honestly the entire North Texas region was beginning to experience these earthquakes. This goes well above, way above the city's ability to be able to manage. We don't have the resources, we don't have the expertise, and quite honestly, we don't have the purview to really provide any solutions, to a regional and really what is a state issue. And one of our goals, as we first started out with our trips and our discussions down in Austin, was to emphasize that this really is a state issue. And just in the last 2 to 3 months, I really appreciate, John and especially Brandon's efforts to help the city, work with our state legislative reps and the governor's office, to say, one, thank you for your assistance in this, but to recognize this as a state issue. And I appreciate the legislative rep support and the governor's office support, and in talking with us and in walking through these issues. And I appreciate Representative Anchia's efforts in working with us and in drafting a bill to help continue to push this along. And so as you can see from where we started just 3 months ago, to where we're at now, to having bills on the table, having funding at least for the equipment, that was there initially, and we're continuing to, hook our, wagon up to that train, and to push to get it on the Senate side, So we're going to continue to push hard, to help secure all the state resources that we can, and we really do appreciate the support that we receive from our legislative folks. They've been fully behind us. I know. Representative Rinaldi, and Representative Anderson have been, very helpful so far, and I wanted to express thanks to them as well. So just wanted to again emphasize this is a state issue, and we're getting some good movement down there in Austin.
I'd be remiss on that comment if I didn't emphasize, and I guess I should say failed to emphasize something earlier, and that is this funding is far from guaranteed. I mean, it is significant that it's not in the Senate bill. And without pointing fingers or stirring the pot, I'll share with you that there are certainly, I think, some corners and some corners in the process and some stakeholders in the process that don't want to see this funded.
Gerald and then Oscar.
Brandon, the hearing that Myrna Crownover chaired back last May, I thought was very positive. Seemed like there was a lot of agreement with the different panels that came in and testified in that hearing. There was the industry, there was the, I think, the environmental panel, and so on and so forth. There was I heard a lot of agreement amongst those groups. And the Railroad Commission didn't seem to be disagreeable about implementing some of the changes that had been addressed in Arkansas and Ohio and some of the other states that have gone through similar seismic activity that Texas has. So, but I guess what you're telling me is there's not any other House or Senate bills that are addressing, I guess, the authority of the Railroad Commission, or because in that hearing it seemed like the Railroad Commission is saying we only get our power from the legislature.
That's right.
And so if the citizens are out there saying, well, we want more communication, more reporting, so on and so forth. We have to get that from the legislature. So was there nothing that came out of that hearing that is, and obviously the deadline has passed for any kind of bills to be brought forward?
I'll answer that question this way. I think that the money that we see in the bill by Representative Crownover, who, as you noted, chaired that committee in the interim, I think that is the reflection of that. The fact that it went to the BEG instead of the Railroad Commission, I think, is a reflection of some people's lack of confidence in the Railroad Commission, not as a whole, but managing this particular issue of studying earthquakes. I'm trying to say that what we're looking at together today is the result of those hearings. But were there or are there other bills out there related to this? No.
Okay.
This is it. This is the landscape.
This is the only one. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment. There was a Dr. Tinker, is that?
Yes, sir.
BEG, and you had mentioned about the Railroad Commission. A lot of people not unhappy with trying to get data from them. I know some of our Irving citizens are kind of frustrated. There's an injection well on DFW property, 2 of them, and there's some, not theories, but there's been other studies that have been confirmed that they may lead to earthquakes, deep water, high pressure injection wells. We've asked, tried to make attempts from Railroad Commission just to give us the quantity of water that's been processed in the injection wells. So I wonder if the BEG would, or if they have a current study, or would be studying the effects of deep water injection wells as a source of maybe some of these earthquakes. So would you see an easy guy to get a hold of and talk to about
Dr.
that
Tinker,
possibility?
yes, sir. He's very accessible, and I think the language in the bill, mandates and charges the BEG with identifying causal factors, and so I would have to assume they would be looking at all issues, oil and gas related and otherwise, as to what might possibly be causing earthquakes.
Oscar, have you gotten your answer to your question that you asked several months ago about where the water from the disposal wells?
No, never have. We had asked, Irving had 2 wells, and it's been the one that was producing was shut down in 2012. We asked the question. The Railroad Commission representative was here over a month ago. The water that came out when we were fracking here in the city limits of Irving, where did the water go from that well? He said, well, I'm surely it's documented. You got to put how many gallons left and where it was disposed at. And the Railroad Commission representative that was here at our city council meeting said he would get that information. We have never received it.
So I don't know if there's like follow-up that we can do through our staff to that agency, but I think getting some answers would be.
Yeah, we were going to continue to ask the agency, but in addition to that, I've asked Romero, to honestly bring in some additional help that, we're just going to go look for it ourselves, and try and pull, the triptychs, whatever it would be, hopefully still anticipating some response from, the Railroad Commission, but, we will, continue to look, and try and find, that information.
This is not just solely myself asking this question. We've had a number of citizens, maybe fellow council members, got copies of those emails, just want some answers. We just give us the data. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Brad?
That's very helpful to see what will be funded and what possibly won't. And Representative Anchia's bill, I know my wish list would be that Irving have its own independent expert, because I think you hear a healthy dose of skepticism. If it's coming from the state, people think there's an agenda, especially if it's coming from the Railroad Commission. So, if we can keep working on that, it'd because it's a different issue. The city doesn't have a resident seismologist, but we may want to look at getting a consultant at some point, to independently evaluate the data, so.
I think it's important that we do keep in mind, though, that way that the paper has reported it, that we had seismic activity to the east of Irving, right? In other words, Dallas. Yeah,
Suburb of Irving.
a suburb of Irving, right?
Yes.
And perhaps this is something I don't know that the city of Irving ever wants to hire their own. Maybe this would be a county issue since this is affecting Dallas. But the problem that I have with that request is people are coming to us already telling us to shut down these injection wells that are outside of our city walls. We don't have any kind of authority to do that. So I think what we're asking is the people who have the authority to regulate the activity are the ones who are going to have to be somewhat in charge. And it's not really a burden that the city should be taking on as well, considering the amount of activity outside, but within North Texas. So this is something I know that Dallas and Irving are definitely, approaching as a partnership.
I refer to it as ownership. We want the state to have ownership of data, even, if there is some downside to, the state's ownership at the end of the day. I think it's critical that we get on the same page in terms of, who's going to be in control of this discussion and data. And I think a lot of us feel it's most important for the state to own that data.
And to Brad's point, I mean, because we have gotten so much activity going on, or at least the perception that we've gotten so much activity going on, that we need to be the lead in addressing it and requesting that help. And to that end, Brad, we're trying to get on the agenda to speak. I think it's the 27th or the first Monday in May. You're welcome to come down to Austin and testify on that bill if you want to do that as well. I've been in touch with Representative Anchia, and I've thanked him for his work on that and just trying to get this out of committee. But anybody who wants to go down there is welcome to do that. John?
I think that, Brad, you do make an excellent point, and there's been said that some of the most powerful forces, even more powerful than governors and legislators, would be trial lawyers. And when they bring about a change, they have to do it with expert testimony. And that is the basis in which you would bring about that kind of change. I do agree that we should pursue this and find out what sort of resource we have, the accuracy of it, the independence of it. And Chris, whenever you obtain that information that Oscar asked you about, since we're one of the 4 host cities of DFW Airport, I do believe we have a right to ask for that information on the injection wells that's located on DFW Airport property, and we should track that one as well. And I think this is a good start, but the independence of these experts is one we should watch and be wise like a serpent as we go forward with this.
Do we have any other questions? Chris?
Mayor, just as an update, Dan, thank you, or Gary, thank you very much. Just got this from Gary. We have been and are continuing to work with the consultant. This is to Oscar's request of getting the information. We have a consultant, Intercon. We have a proposal from them. We got that yesterday, and it'll be that proposal will be going over to the legal department, and so we're well on our way to finding out the information ourselves, quite honestly. So we're moving forward.
Great, thank you very much. Brandon, do you have anything else? All right, how many more weeks do we have?
47 days and 11 hours. Who's counting?
All right,
Brandon,
thank you.
anything else that outside of earthquakes that you see that would be helpful information for the council?
What I'd add to your list of legislators that have been receptive and helpful in this regard, Senator West as well.
Yes,
but no, that's all I'd add. Thank y'all for the opportunity to come address. We'll be back in 48 days to hopefully give you some good news about what happened.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely.